afternoon. Thank you for coming here for my presentation and support me on a Saturday afternoon. This 10-year challenge is also called 2009 versus 2019 challenge. It is very simple. You post a photo of you in 2009 versus a photo of you next to it in 2019. So that's why we have this 10-year challenge. For some people who would like to step up the challenge, they might get a 20-year challenge or 30-year challenge photo. This is what our minister has done because he believes that he has the same beautiful smile. So I'm going to show you mine. By the way, I also have a 1989 one, but because it is so similar to the one in 1999, I think it's redundant, so I just put this over here. So I look very healthy 10 years ago, but this is not the case because in 2009, somehow I was in this company in the top management team, and a year later they have the financial crisis. And there's a lot of cost cutting, restructuring, and layoffs. I was so stressful that every day after work, I would go to this hot pot to go for a run. Because I have a husband and a toddler at home, I don't want to bring all the negative emotions and stress home. So I've been running so much for that year that by the end of 2009, I joined the Standard Chartered Marathon. I ran a full marathon under 4.5 hours. Today, in this presentation, we're going back to 10 years' time to look at what the property market is like back in 2009 during the financial crisis. And then you'll see the challenges of the developers and the home buyers and stakeholders during that time. For the people who have bought the new launch projects in 2009, what happened to them now? And we look at during the bad times, the hard hit and the resilient properties at that time. And then over the last 10 years, which are the projects that are most hard hit or they're most resilient in the last 10 years. Then we look at now, in 2019, what is the property market like? Have they learned a lesson from the last 10 years? After the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers, it kickstarted a 2-year subprime crisis. I like this movie. The Big Short, it's about the financial crisis, why it started, the causes during that time, and at the end, what happened. After that, $5 trillion in all the investments and money are gone, and then 8 million people lost their jobs, plus 6 million people lost their homes, and it's just in the US. In Singapore, the situation is not much better. Our property transactions in 1 year's time from the peak of 2007, it drops all the way, the volumes dropped 65.8%, and prices have fallen 21 to 25%. When I look at the transactions of all the prices during that time, the real prices dropped 21%, but the PPI at that time from the peak actually dropped 25%. But we're not talking about individual markets. For the luxury market, for the high-end market, actually prices have dropped 30 to 35%. Let's look at what had happened during the worst time, that's first quarter of 2009, and what happened last quarter. As you see, we have very boring figures to show last quarter because there's not much change in both property prices and rental over here. But if you look at the first quarter 2009, our private residential property prices dropped 14%, followed by offices 12%, industrial 10%, and retail 4.2%. And it is just in a quarter. Rental is not better. You see offices have dropped in a quarter 10.7%, followed by private residential 8.5%, 5.6% in industrial, and retail another 3.3%. So this is very bad in just 1 quarter's time. Very scary to see how much prices and rental have dropped. So what happened to the developers and home buyers at that time? During the peak of 2007, in the last on-board craze, actually we have 150 in a year of closed deals in on-board. But before the onset of the financial crisis, we managed to close only 7 deals. After that, the number is 0. For the number of new sales in 2007, we have 14,811 that sets the record for the new units sold in that year. After that, the whole year 2008, we only managed to clear 4,200 units. If that is not bad enough, if you look at the luxury market, this is a whole list of projects that's available at that time. So this table is from the Straits Times as of November 2008. You see that we have 2,200 units launched at that time. Half of them are unsold. What are the challenges of developers? Actually, not all developers are making losses at that time. Why? Because remember, a lot of big developers, they have bought their land at very low price during 2005, 2006 at the time. And then they launched it during 2007. So they managed to make a very handsome profit. But not for people who just bought at 2007 and have to launch immediately after the onset of the financial crisis. So what do they do in 2009? They give a lot of discounts. Discounts level is easily 20%, and it can go up to 50% if you remember correctly at that time. During Chinese New Year, they give hongbao. Hongbao is not your $50 one. It's 1,200 hongbao if you buy during the Chinese New Year time. And then they also waive the legal fees and the stamp duties. Then, of course, there are a lot of other gimmicks as well. Some developers, they resort to selling the projects in bulk. For example, the Cross, which is sold by the Google Land, the Malaysian property developer, they managed to sell off one big bulk of 160 units of the Cross to a company that clear the rest of the units by giving just a 10% discount. A lot of developers at that time, they just postpone the launch, or they cancel or delay the construction. Why? Because they know construction costs are going to go down during a bad time. So there's no point continue to build it, because after you build it, you have to launch, you see. So that's why they simply stop or postpone the construction of the projects. Some of the developers, what do they do with those land sites that they bought at sky-high prices during on board? They just stop rebuilding, and then they continue to lease out all the units. So those projects they lease out after on board without rebuilding at the time include Brentford, Leiden Heights, and also Lucky Towers. They're all the luxury projects at the prime districts. Some of them, of course, they try to pull back from all these on-board deals. One of them is, the famous one is King Hill Heights. Developer is Jewel One. What they did is that 20 days before the completion of the deal, they back out. They rather forfeit their deposit of 2.2 million of the 44 million deal than take the risk. What happened to King Hill House 10 years later in 2018? They managed to sell it on board to another developer at $76 million, which is not bad. Because they sell it right before the introduction of the new cooling measures, because they saw it in April in 2018. What happened to home buyers? Some home buyers have bought the projects or the properties at the peak of the market in 2017. Because there is a time lag between the time the bank approved the loan to the time of the disbursement. So that's why in between anything happen, who is going to bear the cost, the risk, is the home buyers. So the banks ask the owners to top up the difference between the low valuation and the purchase prices in cash. So it is lower loan to value right now, and the prices have dropped. But if you decided to forfeit the loan, or you don't want to buy now because prices have dropped, the risks have increased, or you have no money to top up the difference. There's also cancellation fee from the bank loan, which is 1.5% of the loan approved by the bank. And there's also penalty charges, because the developers, they can forfeit whatever that you have paid to them, and they have the right to sue you. Bad developers at that time, they can sue you. They can also charge you the late payment charges. But by the way, late payment charges is 2% above the prevailing lending rates of all the 3 major local banks at the time. But there are actually good developers at that time. What they do is that, for example, you know the Sanchez, right? It is in the Boon Lay area, above the Boon Lay MRT. They just EOB during the financial crisis at that time, the 600 plus units. They developer and the agency, ERA, both of them, they organize a roadshow for all the owners so to help all the owners to find a loan. So they have the three biggest local banks there, have a roadshow to make sure that most of them can get a loan, because developers don't want to lose these buyers as well. You know, where to find so many new buyers if they forfeit it. And there are other solutions offered by group developers. For example, some of them help you, because they have a leasing arm like Far East, for example, so they help you to lease your property so that you have some cash on hand to pay off the difference. Or some of them, they have deferred payment scheme. Deferred payment scheme, that means you don't have to pay now, or you pay interest-only loans, so that you don't have to forfeit whatever that you pay. You don't have to cancel your loan or to give up your purchase. Some of them have a very cute method of changing from bigger units to smaller units, because now you're unable to secure a big loan. So some developers actually help you to change from a bigger loan. For example, you bought 3-bedroom, now it's 2-bedroom or 1-bedroom, so that you're able to afford it. But I think this run is a bit difficult because most of the buyers during the last round of launch, maybe they all buy the shoebox units or 1-bedroom units. This is the smallest in the whole project. So in case anything happens, I think this method will no longer be able to do anything this time, because they can no longer exchange for a small size unit. Okay, during the bad times, the government stepped up to help. So don't complain about the government too much, because during critical moments, we still need the help of the government. What the government did 10 years ago is that it actually bring forward the annual value assessment. So now the annual values of property is lower, so you'll be able to pay a lower property taxes. And they also give out a one-off property tax rebate, so it's 14%. Like for example, if you are owner stay property, instead of 4%, you just pay 2.4%. If you are renting it out, instead of 10%, you will pay 6%. In 1998, the last Asian financial crisis is only 15%. But to be fair, during 1998, our government actually spent a lot of money trying to save the Singapore dollar, so 15% is not bad. For developers, there are also some uplift measures to help them. For example, the 1-year extension for land to be developed within 6 years. Now, the developers, they can keep the land for 7 years for building. Another thing is that there's the extension charges after 2 years, they give another 2 years, so it's 2 plus 2. So in case the end developer need that, they can actually lease out the units for 4 years. So it's 2 plus 2. So some developers actually complained at that time, why didn't you waive off instead of extension? But I think something is better than nothing for them. Okay, let's look at people who bought at the bottom of the market during the subprime crisis. What happened to these projects right now? Have you wondered why people still have money to buy during the crisis? Do they still have a job? Who are still able to afford to buy at a time? They are the survivors of the crisis. You know, those who are most hard hit by the crisis at that time are those people who are rich. People who are able to buy during the 2007 at the peak of the market. Those people who have big investment in equities, in businesses, in properties. And those are most hard hit. People like you and me, we can't afford to buy at a time. Maybe during the bottom of the market, we find very good bargains, and then we go in to buy, provided that we still have a job. And during the bad times, the government will be spending more money. That makes sense, right? If everybody is poor, to stimulate the market, the government spend more money. So that's the time the government announced that Jurong Lake District project at the time. So you see that, especially in the HDB market, in the Jurong West area, that Jurong West District, the HDB actually increased, the prices increased a lot for the whole year. In 1 year's time, Jurong West HDB 3-room flats prices increased 19.4%. And the 4-room flats increased 14%, while the 5-room flats also increased 9%, which is amazing. It's much, much higher than all the other districts. And that's the effect of announcing a new development, a new project at that time. And it is not too bad for the public housing market because the HDB market, the prices still go up during that time. Why? Because during that times, people will be downgrading their homes. So the best-selling ones are the 3-room flats of HDB because 5 executive rooms and 5-room flats, the owners try to downgrade to 4 rooms and 3 rooms. So prices of 3-room flats actually stand very firm during that time. And then you see prices of HDB, they still manage to go up all the way until the peak is second quarter of 2013, until it levels off and reach a plateau for the last few years. So those HDB owners, they still manage to upgrade because they manage to sell their homes and upgrade to condos, which is not too bad at the time. What are the new launches you can recall 10 years ago? It's Double Bay Residences and Simei, Capsion, Livia, and Alexia at Alexandra Road. Wow, you look at the prices, so affordable. But do you know that people at that time, they still complain that, wow, during the bad times, they still sell at this kind of prices, you know, who will go and buy? But a few years ago when prices have gone up to 1,000, 6,000, 8,000 per square foot, even in the RCR region, people still think that this is reasonable. Why? Because we have this boring thought effect. We think it's justifiable for developers to charge at high prices because they purchase the land at record high prices. So we have to help out. We have no choice. But during the bad times, we say, well, these are prices, I don't think it's low because it doesn't look affordable during the bad times. So this is very interesting, you know. High and low is just a psychological thing. You look at these prices and think, wow, you know, where can you find this kind of prices? But at the time, people do complain that it's very high, and that developers have to further lower the prices, even at this level. Okay, what happened to those people who bought at the time for those projects? So I do a comparison using 99.co researcher tool to look at all the condos versus condos TOP 2012 to 2013. Why? Because it takes a few years' time for the projects to be built and to TOP. So after research, we find that most of them TOP 2012 to 2013 for those new projects launched during 2009. So the red color bar is the prices of those projects launched during 2009 and completed 2012 to 2013. So look at it, you notice that the prices performed on the whole lower than all condos, but during the good times, it is higher, which is very interesting. So another reason is that people who bought at very low prices, it's much easier for them to sell at lower price. Why? Because they have a very high margin to pay with. For example, the properties I bought during 2002 to 2006, I can sell like 5 or 10% lower than my neighbors. I'm still very happy because my margin is very high. You see, I still make a profit, so it doesn't matter. So maybe that's the reason why the prices cannot go at lower prices. But if the owners manage to sell at good times, prices and the profit margins are really very high, and it's very profitable. So do consider it. But times are bad. If you have the money, you have the bargaining, you have the means to buy it, do go ahead to do it.